Charlotte Cheng. I'm the author of Night Market Rescue. I also have 5 more books coming out through an imprint and Penguin Random House and also through HarperCollins. My other side, no, actually, my other full-time role is in curriculum development, and I've been in ed tech for over 20 years. So happy to be part of this interview.
Yeah, and if we have time, I feel like there's so much I could talk to you about. It would be interesting to find out more about how the ed tech relates to how you do picture books and all of that. So we'll see if we have some time for that, because I think that is really interesting. When I talk to people that wear like several different hats, like how that all relates to each other. But tell us a little bit more about your picture book.
Sure.
The new one, because you do have a bunch coming out, and you should know that she has several that she's already self-published that you can find on her website.
Yeah, no, thanks for giving that shout out. Charlotte.art, you can find more information. So Night Market Rescue was a 10-year journey for me to get this published. It took a long time. It's about a street dog in Taiwan who discovers a Taiwanese night market. And as he's exploring the sights and sounds of the night market, he discovers a lost friend, and he helps that friend find her family, and perhaps he finds a home of his own. So the perhaps is very it's sort of obvious. It's a picture book. It's going to end happily, but I like to leave a little bit of a suspense there.
Right. Well, we won't spoil it. And so what inspired the book, and what's so special about the night markets in Taiwan? And maybe we should mention that your family is from Taiwan. So this is someplace that you have visited a lot over the years, right?
Yes. Yeah, whenever my family could, both my parents are from Taiwan, and I have a lot of family members in Taiwan. And so whenever my family could, we would go to Taiwan. And it's a long flight. It's a 12-hour flight from where we were, which is down in San Diego. And one of the first things we did when we hopped off the plane was go to a night market, because my parents knew how much I loved the night market. There were just so many fun snacks for kids to nibble on. They often had free samples, and I love Taiwanese sausage, which is like a delicious pork sausage. Sometimes they slice it and they put it with slices of garlic on a skewer, and you'll just eat it that way. So that was so good. There was also squid jerky. So they make jerky, just like beef jerky, out of squid. They have the famous boba, which is where boba was invented, was in Taiwan too. So they had boba, they had ginger tea, lots of different beverages. But on top of that, they had great stalls where they had great toys that kids could play with. And you also learned how to bargain and banter with the vendors, because they would give you a price and you would need to haggle. So I learned how to haggle for the first time at a Taiwanese night market. So lots and lots of very distinct memories for me as a kid. And when I joined a writers conference, I've been really interested in children's books and picture books for many, many years. And I finally treated myself to go to a conference to learn more about the craft. And one of them said, if you want to really stand out in this field, write your unique story that only you could tell. And I just remember so many people, when I said my family was from Taiwan, they would say, oh, I love Thai food. And I go, oh, no one knows what Taiwan is. And so I realized, oh, this is my opportunity to really shine a spotlight on my heritage in Taiwan in a fun way through the night markets.
Yeah, it is really, it is such a fun book. I mean, it does have the serious side, because you're talking about, the dog, and he's by himself, and he finds someone else who's by herself. And so there is kind of a little bit of a serious element to it, but it's such a sweet story, and it's a fun story. But I love going back to what you said about the advice you got about tell that unique story that only you can tell, because to me, it also speaks to the reason we need more diversity in children's books. Could you talk a little bit about like how those are kind of related, and how diverse books or diverse voices kind of add to the stories that we hear?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to talk about that, because I'm actually on the equity task force at our local school district. I have a 4-year-old daughter, she's biracial. And so I've seen firsthand, actually working in a lot of classrooms, how important it is for students to see themselves in the curriculum, to see themselves in the stories that are shared at school. Because when they see themselves, they can aspire to be, who knows, an astronaut, a president, whoever they want to be. And also they can see themselves in these stories and feel that, oh, wow, my story matters, my background matters. And when they realize that they matter, that their story matters, they're way more engaged at school. And so a lot of times when you see kids who are unengaged, it's often because they don't see themselves in what they're learning. They don't see themselves in the curriculum. So part of the work here, and why you ask, how does my work in ed tech impact how I write? It's me seeing that big landscape. I work with thousands of teachers across the US, around the world. And so I see this commonality when teachers are struggling with students, that oftentimes that's what happens. They see a disconnect in what they're learning and why it's important. And so I realize part of our role being in the world of picture books is to, again, make them understand that they matter, that the stories that they hear are about them too.
That is so beautiful. And I want to take a little detour because I would love to hear a little bit more about the equity. What was it? The Equity Task Force at your school? I mean, I know you're in California, so as am I. And the situation here is a little different than, say, like Florida or Texas or some of these. But I'm curious what your experience has been like in terms of how the task force came about, and also, do you get a lot of pushback on your recommendations? What are the top recommendations that you guys have made? What are some things that you've seen either in this school or, like you said, just in your work working with so many schools? What are some of the big changes that you think would make a difference? I mean, obviously you just mentioned one of the big ones, which is more representation.
Right. And so the Equity Task Force just started. We're just formed. And I just came from another task force, which is the Culturally Responsive Curriculum Task Force. And that really highlights one key thing. So I think we're in one of the most diverse areas in California. Actually, I'm in the San Francisco Bay Area, but there's still work to be done. In our school district, there's a huge gap of socioeconomic levels. There's a wide diversity of different people coming from different ethnicities and cultures. And so we need to, when we build the curriculum, have that in mind. And we've noticed that there are some gaps and there are some disparities where some perspectives are more limited when we're teaching specific subject areas. And so being part of that task force, we really reflected, and the task force was like a mix of parents, school faculty, other members of the community, to really bring all those voices in the room. And the Equity Task Force is going to continue that work to really figure out how can we best support teachers who already have a lot on their plate to have those resources so that they can bring equitable and culturally responsive content to the school. We're definitely not Florida, so there's a lot less pushback. So when we presented to the school board, it was a lot of support. Everyone recognizes that this is something that needs to be addressed. And so it feels really good to have allyship and community when we're doing this important work as well. And so that's what I've learned. It takes a village, right? Like you really, if you feel alone in this work and you're like, I really want these voices to be seen, I want these stories to be seen, go find an ally, get a friend. And maybe that friend will have a friend, right? And you build from there, you build that community. And when you have a community, you can do anything, really.
I love that. That is so great to hear, because I feel like we hear so many negative stories about diversity in schools these days. So I love getting to hear your story about what's happening in your school and your school district. That's wonderful. Yeah. And speaking of diversity, just to go back to your book, you mentioned what a journey this was, like a 10-year journey to get this published. But I know really early on you submitted a draft to, let me get it right, the Lee and Low Books New Voices Awards, which I should mention. Lee and Low Books they're a big friend of ours. They're amazing. So why is it so important? Why was it so important for you to have that kind of like an award set up? I know yours wasn't picked to be published at the time, but you say you got a lot of really great encouragement, and just thinking about the role that something like that can have to have more diverse books in publishing.
Right. For those who have been part of the submission process, when you're trying to get a book published by trade, a lot of times I call it the black hole because you send out your manuscript and oftentimes you just don't hear anything back. Like even if they're not interested, they won't respond with a rejection letter because they're getting thousands and thousands of submissions a day. So you're lucky even if you get a form letter, which is just like a 3-sentence like form letter that says, oh, we're just not interested. And you go, okay. And I was collecting these rejection letters a lot. I have this like folder just full of rejection letters. And then Lee and Low, which, like you said, has this new Voices Award, which is still taking place. So if you're interested, definitely check it out. It happens once a year, and you can submit. And anyone who's unpublished is and a person of color can submit to this contest. And so I submitted to that, and I got a multi-page letter back. So even though I didn't win, it was a multi-page letter that went line by line in my manuscript. And what I could not, I held that for years when I continued to have rejections. Like, they saw promise in the story. So that means there's something, there's potential. I shouldn't give up on this story. And she had really great feedback, and I actually iterated on it. When I submitted, it was her last day at Lee and Low. So it didn't work out with her. But hey, I continued, I persisted, and just little nudges along the way. Like, there was an agent who was interested, but then she's like, oh, it's not quite there yet. Because back then it featured just a girl and her mom. So she just nudged me in a direction like, how can it be more exciting and unique? And that's where, when I adopted my dog Waldo, who's a street dog from Taiwan, I was like, wait, a perspective of the night market through a street dog's eyes, aha, that's way more unique. And so every nudge along the way, getting feedback from editors, even if it's a couple sentences that encourage you to keep going, that it makes a huge difference. So I'm so grateful for Lee and Low and the New Voices Award contest. I'm so grateful that we're in like these years now, more recently, where people realize that they need more voices from different cultures and different backgrounds, so that there's more opportunity for stories like mine to come to life.
Right. And I love it also kind of goes back to your point earlier about it takes a village, because, you know, maybe that wasn't the right fit for you, but she gave you really good feedback, and, you know, you get a nudge from this person, that, and I think, especially with trying to get more diverse authors, when, you know, when there's so many roadblocks along the way, to have that village that's really encouraging and helping kind of pull you along is so important. And to go back to your story, something that was really neat that we talked about, well, a couple things is, one is when you switched to the street dog, that you even thought about things like, what would the market look like from a dog's perspective, like getting a little lower, and what would they be interested in? But something else that we were talking about, and I was wondering if you could talk about a little bit more, was how, let me see if I can find the page I was thinking of. In some ways, if somebody's never been to one of these night markets, like, it's something really new. Although maybe they can relate it to like going to a farmer's market, kind of, you know, there's something, but it's something new, and there are a lot of things that they're eating. But then there are other things that, you know, they can relate to. Here's somebody drinking boba tea, and I don't know if I can find the page right away, but there are kids blowing bubbles. So they're like these little pieces that somebody, no matter where they're coming from, they're going to be able, oh, there it is. Kids blowing bubbles that they can relate to. They can relate to finding cool street food, like maybe they've had somewhere else. So how do you find the balance about that, about being very specific, like you said, the unique story only you can tell, but also having these elements like about friendship, about being on your own and maybe finding new family, you know, and so on? How do you find the balance between those universal things, but also staying true to that really specific story?
It's so tricky. It's definitely tricky. I mean, I have a long list of picture book ideas, and a lot of times they just sit there because I haven't figured out that magic combination of specificity based on your unique voice, paired with a theme or story that's approachable, that can connect to like kids from a wide variety of backgrounds, right? And so that's the key when I'm building a story. I still go back to my unique voice, my unique perspective, but then deciding of how to write that story and what voice to use, what plot to use. I then pull on my experience working with a lot of kids and knowing, lots of kids love dogs. Kids kids love dogs. I walk around with my dog Waldo, and we have a second dog, Carmen. Waldo is quite the shy dog, but the kids will run up and want to just pet him so badly. And so knowing that, there's like that attraction there, that kids love street food. You can go to a carnival, anywhere, you see kids just running around. And so realizing, those two themes I could really connect to. So when I'm doing my writing about the night market, I'm really going to boost that. I'm going to highlight those moments more, but then fold in specificity, details, like that sausage. Like when you see the boba, he's sipping ginger tea. So I'm using my words to say, yeah, you might have seen a carnival like this, but this one, this night market, it has ginger tea, it has sizzling sausage, it has bok choy. So then I'm really folding in those details using my words as well. So it's just this dance. And if you're wondering, hey, does my story have that combination? So first look at it through your own eyes. Is this a voice that's unique to me? And then read it again. Is this like a theme that could really appeal to like kids and what they're interested in these days? If you're not sure, read it to kids. I literally have read my stories to kids, and I can see sometimes they're disengaged. I'm like, oh, I'm not there yet. So you iterate, right? You try it out with kids and see, oh, wow, this is not connecting to them at all. And I have to rewrite as well. So there's ways to test it out to see, have you got that combination correctly before you even submit.
That's great advice. And because you have a lot of experience now, you know, we talked about like it's taken you a long time to get the first one published, but now you have all these other books that are coming out, but you've kind of been in this space for a long time. Have you seen the landscape change as far as, you know, being more accepting of diversity, encouraging diverse children's books? Are you hopeful about what direction we're going in, or where do you see that maybe we need to do more work?
I am very hopeful, actually, in two ways. Like, I think the trade route, they're definitely trade means the traditional way of publishing, and you're finding a publishing house that's willing to do your turn your story into a book. They'll give you in advance. They take charge of everything. They'll handle the publishing, the distribution. It's a really great setup, but there's very few books who make it along the way. But even the trade market the last couple of years has really opened their eyes and realized, oh wow, we need more representation in our books. And so they're way more interested and willing to publish stories like mine. And example that my night market rescue story, like I would say 5 years ago, I submitted to the agent that I have now. And at that point, she was just like, Charlotte, this isn't approachable enough, or something like that. And I knew what that meant, right? Like, and I was like, oh, right. But funnily enough, 5 years later, I was just like, hey, I did some tweaks. I submitted it to her again. She's like, oh, no. Now is the time. And she knew. It was just like, and I said, like, why don't we submit to these small, like, indie publishers? Because I know they really like to bring, like, a spotlight to Asian voices. She's like, no. We're going to the big five. And the big five is, like, Penguin Random House, HarperCollins. And I was like, really? And I pretty much didn't believe her. I said, okay, yeah, sure, why not? And one of the manuscripts, not Night Market Rescue, ended up in auction. So it shows you how much the industry has changed. And I've seen it. I've seen it literally transform. And then the other thing I'm really encouraged by is independent publishers. So, for example, you said I've authored other books, including Bobo Loves Dumplings, which is a bilingual board book that my friend and I self-published, and we distributed on Amazon. But there's more and more people who are just like, you know what? I don't want to wait around. And now with the digital tools available out there, with the platforms available out there, they self-publish because they just want that story out to the specific community that they want to meet. And that was so encouraging to see. I just spoke at the Bay Area Book Festival last weekend, and walking around the festival and seeing the tents that popped up and how specific some of these publishers are becoming. Like, we are bringing voices to this specific like culture, to this specific viewpoint, and we are publishing books just for that. That is so exciting to see, because that means that every kid will have a book where they feel seen. And so I'm really encouraged about both of those aspects that's changing over the last couple of years.
That is really exciting. And I love that you're bringing in just from kind of fresh off the street, I guess you could say, like going to the festival. I forgot that was going on, the Bay Area Book Festival. That's so exciting. Yeah. And just to wrap up, because I'm just watching the time, can you give us just a quick overview about all the other books that you're coming? Because I think it's such a funny story, because you wait so long to publish your first book, and then once you have that first book published, it's like boom, boom, boom. Now you have all these other books that are coming out. Can you tell us, just give us a little overview about those and when we can expect to see them?
Sure, yeah. It just takes one person, really, because one of the editors bought like 5 of my other stories. So no, my next one coming out is Roar Chew, illustrated by the Caldecott medalist Dan Santat, who actually got to meet at the Bay Area Book Festival. So we got to like say hi. Check out my Instagram, because there's we took a photo together. And that one's called Roar Chew. It's a dragon who refuses to admit that they have a cold, and their friend Phoenix is trying to help help. And it's this really like centuries old tale of Phoenix and Dragon, which is a mythical like relationship. So that one's great. Next one's A Name for Sister, which is the whole idea of how a name is formed in like old Chinese traditions.
Mm-hmm.
And I fill it with magic of how like a kid's new baby sister gets her name. And then the last one next year is called I Miss You Most, which is written in memory of my grandfather who I lost during the pandemic. And the illustrator also lost her grandfather the same year. And so that story is about how much we miss our grandfathers, really, and how we see them in many things that we do every day. So those are the 3 that are coming out next year. And then the following, there's a couple more as well. But you can follow me on my social media or check out my website to stay updated.
Yeah, and definitely we'll share the picture that you mentioned from the book festival. I'll make sure we share that in our stories also. But if you haven't gotten the new book yet, I really encourage you to do so. We love the book. It's really beautiful and it's a very sweet story. So thank you for coming on and sharing with us today.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
All right.